Good morning, St. Patrick's. It's so lovely to be with you. I was meant to be with you in person, but it is a delight to be here via this format. I had a look at the work that your teacher, Mrs. Matthews, has done, and I have to say, there is nothing that can compete with that. Her work is absolutely superb, and that's why she's rated as one of the top teachers in South Africa, and how lucky you are to have her as your teacher. So what I would like to do today is look at the poetry of Tennyson through the eyes of a poet. I've been blessed with poetry, and don't ever think that the talent that you have is just a hobby or not important. The talent that you have is the thing that will define the course of your life. The passion that you have is the thing that will define the course of your life. And in Ulysses, it's that same passion that takes him on a journey and will not allow him to rest, no matter what his age is. And how wonderful to live a life filled with that kind of purpose. And so Ulysses by Tennyson is one of my all-time favorite poems. And when I teach it, I reteach myself the important things that it brings with it. And there are lines here that you can take away, just a single line that can change the course of your life when you get stuck somewhere, when you're applying for a university and you can't get in, when you are trying to do something that seems impossible. There may just be a line taught in the middle of coronavirus in your matric year that will come back to you 10, 15 years down the line, and you'll say, wait a minute, I can. I was asked to speak at a funeral just 2 Saturdays ago, and I took the lines of Ulysses with me to say to those who were still there that there is never a time to rest, never a time to think that we have done enough, drunk enough from the cup of life. And so at 64, my age, I'm telling you to drink life to the lees. So let's have a look at some of those lines that really just fill your heart and your soul, and to come away from poetry as a conversation, as a song in your heart, and more than just the alliteration, the metaphors, the sound devices, all of the things that we as teachers must teach you. But how do we teach the heart of the poet? And having had my own poems taught in many schools and examined and seen how they have been interpreted and how they have come back, this is one thing I know for sure. The poet doesn't always mean what we think he or she means, but that doesn't matter. If it speaks to your heart, listen to the poem with your heart. You can intellectualize it, but listen with your heart. And so my poet's heart resonates with Tennyson. And at the beginning of the poem, Tennyson is bored. He has had this amazing life filled with the most magnificent adventures. And he comes home to his wonderful wife, Penelope, by the way, who has a fabulous story of her own and has been true and loyal. But Ulysses sits down and kind of thinks, well, I don't know, what next? I should be retired. I've done a heck of a lot, but no, I'm not enjoying this. This is not how I see myself to be. And so he decides, I cannot rest from travel. How wonderful to live a life where you cannot rest from travel. And travel doesn't mean going all over the world, as wonderful as that is. Travel is travel through knowledge, travel through experience, travel through conversation and meeting other people. I cannot rest from travel. I will drink life to the lees. The lees, those little bitter pieces that they used to have before wine was properly distilled at the bottom of the wine. Or when you have a cup of tea and there are tea leaves in the bottom if you use that kind of tea. And he says, it doesn't matter whether I drink this good wine and then down at the bottom, there's the bitter part. That's okay, because in life, the bitter and the sweet must both be tasted. We cannot have the one without the other. We cannot live a life without drinking sometimes down to the lees. He says, I've enjoyed both. All experiences I have enjoyed. And my purpose is not to go through the poem line by line, but to take out those lines that can become your heart lines. He says, I am forever roaming with a hungry heart. And if you look at the words that he uses, there's such a restlessness. You can't tie him down. You know what it's like on a Friday and it's the last lesson and you just wish you could get out? And this is Ulysses. Open the door. Let me out. There is a world beyond this and I want to adventure in it. Don't close the door on me. And so he says, I am for always roaming with a hungry heart, new experience, new things. I cannot rest from travel. He talks about his battles on Troy, the ringing plains of Troy. And imagine the great battles that he has fought. Yet he says, I am part of all that I have met. There is no experience that is not part of the tapestry of my life, like drinking life to the lees, the bitter and the sweet. But if you look around, if you're in a class now, or you see faces on your screen, think back over the years at school. Every single person is part of the tapestry of who you are. Your friends, the people you don't like, the teachers, the experiences, that is all a pattern sewn into the tapestry of your life. I am part of all that I have met. Yet, he says, even though I have that richness, yet all experience is an arch where through gleams that untraveled world whose margin fades forever and forever when I move. And he looks at life and he says, I'm not stuck. There is an arch, and that arch is an entrance into almost for what seems to him to be some kind of magic portal. If I go through this, there is the untraveled world, the experiences I haven't had yet. More wine to drink, more tapestry threads to add to my life. And it gleams, it calls him. It's not there, it's not a known. He goes into the unknown as an adventurer, as you at the end of your matric year go into the world unknown and as an adventurer. There, gleaming on your horizon, is that untraveled world. But he says, that horizon is something, that margin, that horizon fades as I move. And you'll know, being out on a flat piece of land or being on water, doesn't matter how far you travel, the horizon moves with you. Soldiers, at least sailors, used to believe that the world was flat. And so they wouldn't sail because they were scared that the horizon, which looked like a straight line, that they would sail over that horizon and then they would fall and there would be dragons there and they would be eaten by the dragons. Ulysses says to us, all of us, as we sail and navigate our own world, move. The horizon will hold you. Move. Keep traveling. Keep roaming with a hungry heart. How dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rust unburnished and not to shine in use. How dull it is to pause. That doesn't mean we should never rest. But how dull it would be to say, oh, I'm so bored in this lesson. I started writing poetry in maths because I couldn't do maths very well. And so I did something else, and what I could do was write poetry. So I started writing my poems in grade 8, and people liked them. I started writing them as probably quite naughty little limericks about the maths teacher. How dull it is to pause. If you can't do one thing, do another. Nobody can get into your head and see what is happening there. Be alive to the moment, be alive to the world. Don't make an end of something. And he talks about his sword, that he says, if it's in the scabbard, it'll rust. But if it's used always, as that sword goes in and out of its sheath, out of its scabbard, the rust is taken away and it shines in use. Interesting thing about life, the people who shine in use very often are not the talented ones. We look around us and think, oh, that person's super talented, they're going to go far. You know the ones who go far? The ones who do not rust in use, but shine, 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 and keep repeating, showing up with who they are. Sometimes talented people can rest on their talent and not do the work. He says, as though to breathe were life. And he says there's a kind of arrogance in that. Why should you just think because you're breathing that you're alive? Life is beyond that. And he says, if you gave me life piled on life, we're all too little. Give me 3 lives, give me 6 lives, and I will live each one to the full. Imagine knowing everything there is to know in the world. What a terrible place that would be. How fabulous to find something new, to go somewhere new. Every hour, he says, saved from that eternal silence, something more. And so he breaks it down, not just into months and weeks and days, but he says every hour is important to me. Every hour. Every hour, something more, a bringer of new things. And how could I just sit around doing nothing when there is this wide world to go? And he says, I can't hoard myself. To hoard is to store away, not to allow anybody else to have it. And he says, although I'm grey in spirit, and it's almost as if in that spirit he has already moved into a kind of deathly experience. But he says, even there, no, my spirit may be grey. Maybe my body is getting old, and he talks about that at the end of the poem. It doesn't matter, he says. Although I'm grey in spirit, I am yearning in desire. Look at those 2 words together, yearning and desire. What have you longed for? Think of someone or something now that you long for. I am yearning and desire for just 1 more hour of life. To follow knowledge, he says, like a sinking star. Back to that idea of the horizon, that sinking star that as you move and the world moves, you're never going to catch it. And that's the joy, that you will never know everything. Knowledge, like a sinking star, goes before you all the way. This, he says, I must go beyond the utmost bound of human thought. There is no boundary, no horizon, no margin that will keep me. But I will go through that gleaming arch and find that moving world on the other side. He talks about his son Telemachus, and he's quite dismissive, and he gives him all the boring things to do. So, he's like the accountant adding up the figures, and Ulysses is the great hero off on his adventure. And at the end of that little section, I'm not going to go through it because it's almost like a list of things that Telemachus has to do in order to release this heroic father into his world. And the end of it, with just one short sentence, he says, he works his works, I mine. And with that, he cuts his ties with his wife, his family, with Ithaca, with his people. And he says, no, I'm sailing away from this, from what I know into the unknown. Think also of Ulysses living on a little island. that also would be very containing for him. So he wants to go beyond that insular space. In the last section of the poem, he sees the port, and there's the ship, and the wind is beginning to puff at the sails, and you can sense that movement, and the excitement begins to rise for Ulysses as he can see the ship, he can see the journey. Just as you look towards the end of the year and the wind is beginning to puff into the sails of a new life for you, a new experience away from the island of school and into the adventure of the unknown. Never be afraid of it. Meet it head on. Shine in use. Drink it to the lees. And so he then calls on his friends. He says to his sailors, "You and I are old. That's okay. We're not dead, only old." And so often we relegate people and say, "You are too young, you can't do that." Or "You are too old, you can't do that." You do what you do. I work my work, he works his. Do what you have to do. Old age, he says, hath yet his honor and his toil. And he sees a great value in work. Toil is work. Sailing is work. You don't just get onto a sailing boat with sails, and they would have had oars that had to be, they would have to row in and out of the port sometimes, or when they would be calmed. And Ulysses, this is work. This is toil, but let's welcome it. Let's call on it. And let's drink life again to the lees. Death closes all. Yes, but he says, something ere the end, something before the end, some work of noble note may yet be done. You can change the world with a single line of a powerful speech, of a poem, in a song, with a dance. What is the world calling you to add? Some work of noble note yet to be done. Lights begin to twinkle from the rocks, and you can see through that horizon, that world that is gleaming, twinkling towards him. And in the next line, oh, listen to it. The long day wanes. Listen to the sound of it. The slow moon climbs the deep moans round with many voices. Isn't that beautiful? Listen to the assonance that creates the sound and the flow and the waves, just waiting there, waiting for Ulysses and his mariners. Come, my friends, come on, it's not too late. One of the greatest motivational speakers of all time, Tennyson. Come, my friends, it's not too late. It's not too late to seek a newer world. And as you stand on the edge of your matric year, come, my friends, it is not too late to seek a newer world, a different place. And so they leave. And he says, my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset. And that's impossible. You can't sail beyond the sunset. But it goes back to what he was saying earlier, that margin that gleams and forever moves away from him, that sinking star that he will follow. I will sail beyond the sunset, meaning I will never stop. He talks about the reality of the things that might happen. Perhaps they'll be drowned, perhaps they'll be in storms, perhaps they'll re-meet the great Achilles with whom he has fought before. And he acknowledges, he says, we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven. I have grown older. Things are more difficult for me now. Still, he says, that which we are, we are. That tapestry, that has been woven through him, that experience, I am part of all that I have met. That which we are, we are. You cannot, the body may age, but the courage does not. The boldness does not. The fire does not, unless you choose to let the fire go out and use age as an excuse. There's a wonderful artist by the name of Grandma Moses, who is an American folk artist, who started her painting when she was 76 and became one of the most famous painters in America. Died in her hundreds, I think about 105, still producing magnificent artwork. Don't ever say you are too young or you are too old. That which you are, and you know what burns in your heart. Nobody else. Step up, step up. The journey is about to begin. Ulysses says, here we are, one equal temper of heroic hearts. I know that I can sail with you. I've been with you before, but I know the courage that you have, your heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will. And that is the only thing that matters. Whatever comes at us, no matter how hard the world seems to be strong in will. And one of the most famous lines of poetry, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. What a wonderful line to take away with you as you go into a life that's going to offer adventures and challenges, love and loss. Let your purpose be to sail always beyond the sunset, to follow knowledge like a sinking star, to be strong in will, and always to strive, to try hard, to seek, to find something new in every hour. To strive, to seek, to find, because you won't find anything unless you are seeking, and not to yield. Not to yield. It's been wonderful sharing this poem with you, grade 12, and I hope I've given you a little bit of my heart in the heart of this poem. Best of luck as you sail beyond the sunset.